This is Austria, 1984. Now, I want you to picture a little town called Amstetten. It's the kind of place where nothing ever really happens. People chat with neighbors over garden fences, kids run through the streets kicking balls, and life just feels normal. But behind the walls of one family home, something so twisted was unfolding that it would take decades to come to light.
Yet for 24 years, no one suspected the appalling crimes that were going on in there.
Let me tell you about this man. We will call him the provider. To everyone in town, he seemed like an ordinary guy. He worked hard, kept to himself, and took care of his family, just like any normal man would do, right? People might have thought he was a little strict, maybe even old-fashioned, but nothing that raised eyebrows. Inside his home door, he was a tyrant. He controlled everything, what people say, what they did, and how they lived. Now, in this family was an 18-year-old girl. We'll call her the dreamer. She was bright, curious, and itching to get out of the father's shadow. She wanted freedom to explore, to make her own choices, to breathe, without someone always telling her what to do. But the provider had other plans.
I'm very angry. I'm angry with it because I cannot believe that anyone can do this to a woman.
One day, he called her over, said he needed her help with something in the basement. She probably didn't think much about it, just another one of his days. He had been working on the basement for years, but nobody really knew why. So she followed him down the stairs, not knowing that her whole life was about to change. At some point, I think she might have turned around and realized he wasn't behind her. The door was shut, locked. Maybe she laughed nervously at first, thinking he was playing some weird joke, he's the father, to cry out loud. But then she waited, and then he finally came back. It wasn't to let her out. What do you even say to someone who just locked you in a basement? She probably yelled, maybe begged or demanded answers. But the provider? He just kept coming back with food and water, acting like this was normal. She must have realized pretty quickly this wasn't a mistake. She wasn't getting out. Meanwhile, up in the real world, people were starting to ask questions. Where was she? Her siblings, her friends, even her mom? They were worried. Where is she? But the provider had already thought about all of this. He told them she had run away to join the cult.
And he convinced everyone that his daughter did run away because she was very difficult, and even if she was a child, she was a difficult child.
And just to sell the story, he forced her to write letters saying, "Do not come looking for me." Who is going to argue with a handwritten letter? Case closed. Life moved on. But now, for her, the basement became her whole world. It was cold and damp and small, and definitely not a place for anyone to live in. And yet, she had to. The provider came down regularly, not to check on her, but to, let's say, to remind her that she wasn't in charge. What do you even do in this kind of situation? I can't even imagine it. But she couldn't give up, Who would have blamed her? But she did not. Years passed on. And in those years, something happened that nobody could have predicted. She became a mother. She became a mother to her own father. 7 times, 7 children were born in this basement. Some of them stayed with her, and others, the provider, took them upstairs, told his wife and the neighbors that were adopted children. Can you imagine that? He was raising these kids right above her, pretending like everything was fine.
I thought, I cannot believe it. This can't be true. This can't be true. It's a monstrous case. Because it's the own father who did this to his daughter.
And yet, even in those horrible conditions, she found a way to survive. She taught the kids who stayed with her to read and to write and to dream about a world beyond those concrete walls. She gave them hope even when she had every reason to lose her own. Then in 2008, everything started to unravel. One of the children, a teenager girl, got sick, really sick. The kind of sick you can just ignore. The provider panicked. He couldn't treat her in the basement, so he brought her to the hospital. That's where things got interesting. The doctors took one look at this kid and thought, something's not right here. She was pale, malnourished, and had no medical history.
She looked like a ghost. She was seriously ill, her only relative, a mysterious grandfather.
They called in the authorities, and that was the beginning of the end to the provider. When the police showed up, they must have thought they were walking into some weird family drama, but what they found was so much worse. Beneath the house was a hidden world, a basement built to keep secrets. And inside, they found her, Elizabeth Fritzl. After 24 years of being locked away, she and her children were finally free. The truth came out and the world was horrified. The provider wasn't just some overbearing dad, who was Joseph Fritzl, the man who had orchestrated one of the most shocking cases of abuse and imprisonment in history of humankind. The trial was a media frenzy. Joseph Fritzl tried to explain himself, but there was no justification for what he did. Who would have believed what he did? I mean, who on earth would believe what he has done to his daughter? Anyway, he was sentenced to life in prison, though honestly, no punishment could ever match the horrors he inflicted on this little girl. Elizabeth and her children, I think they're out there, living somewhere under new identities, trying to rebuild lives that were stolen away from them. And that little town of Amstetten, it is still quiet, it's still picturesque, but now it carries a shadow, a reminder of what can happen when the darkest secrets go unnoticed for far too long.